Okay, well, here we are, episode 46, still going strong, I guess.
Keep up the optimism.
Yeah. With you as always, me, Chucky, and we've got Jigsaw.
It is indeed your homeboy Jigsaw.
Mm-hmm. Now, I certainly had a great time this past couple of days with these movies. Why don't you let everyone know what we've got on
Indeed.
for discussion?
We start off tonight with the, I would say, cult classic Blood Harvest from 1987 with Tiny Tim. Then we move into a somewhat forgotten post-Scream slasher, Cherry Flowers from 2000. Then another in the course of beautiful action movies by this homeboy Andy. We have Gans, which is from 1990, which is a fantastic name. Then a somewhat interesting entry tonight, A Stranger is Watching from 1982. And we finish off with a movie that I have known about for a long time but have not seen until now, A Dolly Dearest from 1991.
For reals. We should
Yes.
also mention that those last two movies, A Stranger is Watching and Dolly Dearest, they're both Rip Torn movies, so I guess we're having some sort of mini Rip Torn marathon.
Yeah, I noticed that when watching them. The problem, as far as I'm concerned, though, is I have no idea who Rip Torn is. So I just thought it was like a really stupid acting name, and I saw it.
Yeah, well, maybe it is. I don't know too much about him. I know the actor, but I don't really understand why he's got such a stupid name. Unless that's the name his parents gave, which is even more fucked up. Anyways, we'll get things started off with Blood Harvest from 1987. This one is about Jill, who's visiting home from college. She arrives to find her parents missing and their home is vandalized. Some people get killed in the barn next door, but I don't know, there's not much I can really go into about the plot without really giving much away, I think. This is obviously a movie that I've been wanting to see for a while, mainly because, it's a horror movie with a clown in it. And for people out there who know me, I tend to enjoy watching clown horror movies. Now, I went into this one thinking the clown would be the killer. And I guess, not so much a spoiler, but the clown is not the killer. Just ends up being a bit of a mentally handicapped type person. There's, well, before I get into too much about it, just in general, I have very mixed feelings about this movie. I'm not quite sure if I actually liked it or disliked it, or I think I kind of found it somewhat mediocre. Somewhere in the middle, I guess. But yeah, like I said, before I get into more about that, what did you think?
Well, this is a movie I've seen once before, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. And I thought it was interesting back then. There were a few scenes that, months after the movie, that still stuck out in my mind. So I was sort of interested in seeing it again. And even now, while it may not be a great movie, I think there's some really interesting things here. There's like at times it feels like a cheap late 80s slasher, but then they also throw in some emotional punches, I think, at times, and also some rather creepy sexual assault going on. So I think there's a lot of things here that are decent. I'm just not sure if the final product was as good as it could have been.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of nudity in the movie. It's just really weird too. It's like the director really tried to get some titty shots, and I noticed there's one scene where he's kind of like panned up to their faces, and he just randomly pans down at the tits. And it didn't seem necessary, but hey, I appreciate that sometimes.
On a related note, it looks like this is the only movie that the main female actress did. So it's a shame because she certainly had a beautiful body.
Well, maybe after doing this one, she's like Fuck that shit.
You have to get it naked for Tiny Tim. She may not have just been feeling it anymore.
By the way, I mean, I know the name Tiny Tim, like I've heard it heaps. To be honest, I've never really known why he's somebody. Like I don't really know anything about him.
I mostly know him from, he had a few like really cheap ukulele songs back in I think the late 60s, early 70s that have gotten a lot of either on like commercials or just on TV, like airplay over here. So there's certainly some songs by him I in a way grew up with just by hearing them so many times. But that's I think pretty much all he's really known for.
Yeah. Well, I know he does or that one silly song they play in Insidious. The original Insidious
Was
was
that Tiptoeing
his song.
Through the Tulips?
Yeah. In fact, I was looking at the Blu-ray special features for this one. And it's got like this full concert, or well, concert might be a stretch, performance of him playing songs for, I guess, over an hour.
Huh.
I watched maybe the first 5-10 minutes of it, but
It's probably not your style of music.
no, not really. But he did play that specific song that was in Insidious, so yeah, that was interesting, I guess.
And here in Blood Harvest, he has the Avocacci, was it Jack and Gary and Jill go up the hill, so that's always fun. He has a beautifully high voice.
Yeah, he I mean, he just seems to just randomly sing all over the place. Like, I wouldn't even be surprised, like, if he's on the toilet and he's like, I'm on the toilet, I'm taking a nasty shit. You know, he'd do, I don't know, he's just fucking weirdo.
Well, after what his character goes through, can you blame him?
Beulah. No, Beulah, my favorite pig. Yeah.
Actually, I do think that scene where he's just sort of singing and sobbing in the church is actually a decent scene. I mean, it's a bit ridiculous, but it's emotionally resonant. So.
Yeah, I was thinking during that one scene, I just thought it was pretty uncanny how similar that church looked like the one that I used to go to when I was young. But anyways, I guess one of the other things that I wanted to quickly mention was the sheriff in the movie, who is just one of the laziest sheriffs I've ever seen in a movie. He's like, he gets a complaint about, you know, someone smashing window and vandalizing the house and all this kind of stuff, and he's like, oh, I got a softball game. It's like, what, you want me to go to your house right now?
Hey, to his credit though, he actually did show up eventually, so...
Yeah. He seemed pretty useless.
He still may not be the best sheriff out there.
He probably self-appointed himself as sheriff.
Yeah. And actually, that's another interesting, I think, to me, how a lot of this, the backstory revolves around the girl's parents are missing, and the father worked for the bank, and a bunch of farmers have been evicted. So there's a bit of an almost economic undercurrent in this. So I just thought that was an interesting thing I noticed.
It seemed like it didn't take too long to realize that Tiny Tim in the movie is not the killer, obviously, but I mean, I picked it out pretty quickly, to be honest. In fact, there's multiple of these movies that we've discussed today. Well, the other one, Cherry Falls, we'll talk about that next, but yeah, I found this one pretty easy to guess who was doing all of this, and so there wasn't much mystery to it, or at least if they felt there was, I guess, you know, they didn't do a great job in that area, but hey, it's a cheap 80s slasher, so...
How do you feel about that one guy just dragging the woman and just stripping her down every night just to take pictures? Some quality. I mean, that's dedication, I guess. God.
Anyways, like that guy said, he said, I don't want my innocence back, I just want the feeling of losing it again. Like, well, if he wants that, he should just have someone give him anal.
I'm sure that was out of rage back then.
I don't feel like there's a whole lot to this movie. I mean, it's At least plot-wise, there's not. Maybe psychologically there is, but I've never been a huge fan of psychological aspects of movies, so at least I'm very picky with it.
Yeah, so like I said, I've seen Blood Harvest once before, and it stuck out primarily due to the presence of Tiny Tim, which I thought was interesting. I think I think Blood Harvest is a decent movie. I think the goal is okay for what it is. It's certainly not amazing, but it's a movie I could see myself watching again in the future. So while it's below average, I don't think it's disastrously below average. I'm going to give this a 6.5, and I think I'm just going to round up to an average rating of a 7.
I'm still. I'm deciding somewhere between a 5 and a 6. I think.
Follow your heart.
Yeah. Look, I'll be generous. I'll give it a 6, but I'm not so sure. But yeah, okay, I'll give it a 6 for now. We'll see how it goes next time. Speaking of which, I mean, the Blu-ray that I've got says it's been essentially like released edited on all previous versions, basically. So, do you happen to know if you've watched the fully uncut version, like this Blu-ray?
To be honest, I do not. I would be surprised if I did. I didn't really perceive anything different from the version I watched this time to the one I saw like 5 years ago, so I'm just going to assume it's the original.
Yeah. It's probably got some less nudity and stuff, but anyways, this, yeah, I'm just reading the back of the Blu-ray, and it says, where is it? Long available only in heavily cut and grey market editions. So this one is now fully uncut, uncensored, and newly restored from its recently discovered original camera negative. Well, there you go. Anyways, of course you'd want to watch uncut version of a movie. To be honest, I get the feeling that it's not going to
change much,
make a huge difference to how well you enjoy it. But anyways, I'm sure it's better that way than edited.
And we are moving on to the, like I said, largely forgotten Cherry Farce from 2000, in which a small town of Cherry Farce, Virginia, has a psychotic murder going around, killing off virgins from the local high school. And of course, this causes concern amongst the parents, and it makes other kids happy because they get to try to not be virgins, and it's good times. This is, like I said earlier, one of those post-Scream slashes that sort of disappeared over the years. It did help that this did have a theatrical release in the US, to my understanding. I always found it a pretty okay movie. I've seen it maybe 3 or 4 times before, and even after watching it again, though I see there's certainly some issues with it, I still prefer it over maybe some higher budget late 90s slashes, such as, I don't know, let's say Urban Legend. So I think this movie certainly has some decent things in it. Have you seen this one before, or is this like a first time watch for you, Chucky?
No, it's a first time watch. I'm very well aware of the movie title. Like, I used to see it in all the DVD bargain bins back when DVD was, the only real format that you could go out and buy. But yeah, I never really knew much about what the movie was or what it was about. And I think somewhat recently, in the past year or two, I've been seeing articles, from places like, Bloody Disgusting usually does this thing where they drag up some sort of older movie that no one really talks about anymore, and they're like, oh, this is an underrated movie and stuff, and usually they're just pulling out some piece of shit movie and just calling it underrated because they need to meet their quota of shitty articles for the week. But yeah, I mean, this is, look, it's okay. I mean, it's not a bad movie. It's it's a 2000 slasher movie. It's it certainly looks like a budget version of something like Scream. You know, the funny thing is, I'm not someone who usually tries to guess who the killer is, and even in those instances where I do try to guess, I often get it wrong. But this one, I guessed like 10 minutes into the movie, and it was so easy. I mean, I'm not going to spoil it, but they just show this person way too much for such an insignificant role in the movie that, well, I would have assumed would have been an insignificant part of the movie. But, you know, shit happens.
Did it remind you of your high school days, by the way?
No. In fact, oh man. Would I have loved high school days where they have a fucking sex orgy?
Yeah, that's certainly an interesting development.
And it's pretty fucked up that they're just like, let's have a sex orgy so we don't die.
Yeah. I sort of like the principle is like, hey guys, you know, I hear this is wild party going to be happening. I'll punish anybody who goes. Like, I highly doubt that's going to stop most people from going to such an exciting occasion. Especially given what we learn about what his character does anyway. So.
I mean, it's kind of cool though that the killer interrupts the sex orgy and starts, you know, trying to kill people. But
yes, and actually on a related topic, that sex orgy was one of the tamest sex orgies I've seen in my life. It's like. It's practically no nudity. You see a lot of women in skimpy underwear, but it's like virtually no nudity. And though this movie has like a tiny scene of nudity, you can definitely tell it has a very cut back, tame feel. And I think that's largely due to some arguments with the MPAA when this came out.
I kept thinking and I think it was like in the flashback where they show that flashback Laura Lee scene, and I kept thinking from Scream when Matthew Lillard's character is saying something like when they're watching Halloween, when are we gonna see Jamie Lee's breasts? And I'm just thinking the same thing, when are we gonna see Laura Lee's breasts? And we don't get to see them, so
I'm sure it's probably one of the most disappointing moments of your recent movie watching career.
Took it down 1 rating. Yeah. I guess I could say that I did enjoy some of the stupid teenage banter, especially earlier in the movie. Like, there's some funny lines of dialogue and things like that. But yeah, it's okay. It's certainly not as good as Scream. I mean, maybe some of the sequels, but not the original.
Yes.
I guess the only other thing that I wanted to mention was I found it really, well, it was pretty funny that that meeting with the parents turned into a brawl so quickly. That was funny.
Your dad has nothing to worry about. Some sly people going to that thing.
I kind of get why they're bringing it up, but at the same time, I mean, what did you really expect to get out of the meeting? It's just like immediately, like they say, so what do you want us to do? Tell our kids to go out and fuck?
Well, I did like, I think it was the principal talking to the police officer, you know, hey, there's going to be like a lot of, you know, teens having sex. It's like, well, it's better than a pile of dead bodies. So, hey, I guess between those 2 choices, promiscuous sex is definitely the way to go. Got that cliche speech though by the that one chick who's talking about how men just never trust a man to do anything when it comes to sex. That's a good time.
I mean, what a whore. You're in high school and you're speaking from experience.
Yeah, that scene actually reminded me of something you might see in American Pie or something, which is a lot of how this movie actually feels, like one of the low-budget DVD rip-offs.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that I sort of enjoy about this one is the mystery behind, well, who the killer is and the killer's connection to other people in town. It has elements of almost a Nightmare on Elm Street conspiracy type thing, and I think it's interesting, even though I don't think it's necessarily handled correctly. Like at the end when the FBI is talking to the survivors and they're just just hide the whole thing, which is not really. It's pretty much how the thing started to begin with. So I'm not sure if that's the right message, but that's all I have.
Yeah. I mean, I could tell from all the different attacking scenes in the movie that it was a dude. If you couldn't tell from the opening scene, you could definitely tell from the scene where he's attacking Brittany Murphy's character.
Speaking of which, what a beautiful character. She did have the decently cute look to her, so I was okay seeing Brittany Murphy here.
Yes.
Yes. So this is a movie that I have, I guess maybe some nostalgic value to. You know, even though it's not perfect. For instance, think about the ending. Like, it's just some metaphorical water turned into blood. It was hideous looking. So this movie has flaws, but I've always sort of liked it. So I'm going to give this one right now a 7.5, which is just above average for me, but I'm going to round that down to a 7 out of 10.
I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10. It's not bad, but it's... Oh, you know, you can compare it to the Scream movies, I guess. It's similar type thing, high school slasher, blah 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 blah. But obviously not done as well. Characters throughout the movie aren't as interesting as you'd see in like a Scream. But it was okay. So yeah, 6 out of 10. You know, it's I'll probably watch it again at some point, maybe 5-10 years down the line, but I'm certainly not rushing to go back to this one anytime soon.
But why would you wear lipstick? Because it makes you look pretty.
That was sexy.
I was okay with seeing the actor in lipstick.
Because you find him attractive?
Hey, that was certainly a decent looking actor. No matter what your sexuality is. But speaking of potentially attractive actors and actresses, what movie do we have next, Trackster?
Boing! Yeah. So next up we've got Guns, which was from 1990, I believe. Yeah, 1990. Yeah, so, I mean, it's just the next movie in line from all these Andy Sedaris titty flicks. And this one is, I mean, look, I'll give you the plot, but to be honest, does it really matter? Does it really matter? So essentially, after a failed assassination attempt on her partner, the main DEA agent that we've seen in a lot of these previous movies, played by Donna Spear, she discovers that the crime lord responsible for her father's death is coming after her and her friends, basically. Yeah, like I was saying, it's really just like all the others. You're not going to watch this and be like, this one's a 10 out of 10 compared to the others, or this one's a 0 out of 10 compared to the others. I mean, Hard Ticket to Hawaii, that was a little bit different because it just had that extra added element of craziness with the snake, which we just haven't seen with any of these other movies, but they've all been pretty consistent in just what they do, really. And a lot of what they do is show titties, which I do enjoy. This is a type of movie I would purely call a popcorn flick. You know, you can turn off your brain and, well, your brain turns off anyways because the blood's already running to a different area, if you catch my drift.
You may not be as sly and coy as you might think you are.
Damn it. But, yeah, I did notice that Cynthia Brimhall is back. She was my favorite from some of the earlier movies, and I don't believe she was in the last one that we watched.
The Savage Beach.
Yeah, so it was really good to see her back, and I think once again she was the best looking one here, at least in my tastes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I did catch a name of this one woman, and to preface this, one of my big things with these movies is everybody reminds me of each other. So none of these women really stand out to me. So any of these have probably been main characters and I just haven't counted. But one of the women here, played by Roberta Vasquez, she played a character named Nicole. I thought she was probably the most attractive woman here. But you also have to throw a little munch into the fact that this movie also has Danny Trejo in it, which is sort of funny.
He's so young.
But he looks exactly the same too, which is the same mustache.
Yeah, he loves the stash. Yeah. Funny thing is, whenever I watch these movies, I always enjoy watching. Well, before the movie starts, there's always like an intro on the Blu-rays, and it's usually the like Andy Sedaris, and Julie Strain's usually next to him because she's in some of the other movies, and I guess they filmed these introductions all in one go. But she always manages to get her tits out in these introductions, which is always something I look forward to, I must say. As soon as they're like, so, they start talking about guns, and she's like, oh, you mean like these guns? And just whips them out.
You're a man of simple pleasures.
I definitely am. Can't wait for the next movie intro.
So, one of the things I actually legitimately appreciated about this movie was that it flashed back to, I think it was Picasso Trigger, but it shows an attack by a helicopter upon these two agents driving either to or from Las Vegas. But one of the characters in this movie apparently was the brother of one of those agents, so I just appreciated seeing that flashback.
I thought you were going to say you appreciated how many times they could use the same black guy in every movie as a different character.
Well, that's not surprising given this type of movie.
Yeah. Like, I'm pretty sure that guy was even in Malibu Express.
So he's been here since the beginning.
Yeah, and in fact, I think even he was in one or two of the intros as well. So, yeah, he just seems to be one of those actors that just is like big friends with the director or something. I don't know, but he manages to find a way to get into every movie, despite not really having a consistent role. The music, it's pretty much the usual stuff, but I did notice in this one, just some of the randomness in the music, like the, I don't know what if you call it the drumming in the background during certain theme songs, but it just seems so random, like do 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 do. It's just like all over the place. There's no beats or anything. It's just random snares and I don't know. But hey, I guess it works, or at least the titties are too distracting to really think too much about it.
On a related note, unrelated to the beautiful form of women, but one thing in the story I did also enjoy about this was how some of this plot was basically just to get these people out of Hawaii so they can use Hawaii without putting the operation at risk. So that was sort of a slightly more clever thing than I would have expected out of a movie like this. So I guess well done there.
How dare you stop talking about titties to talk about the plot?
I know. I am a often disappointed individual.
I'm disappointed in you.
Yes. How do you feel about the one magician guy who just kills those two people? I mean, he's pretty badass, so.
Yes.
I feel sort of bad. Because that guy could have been one of the main characters in a later movie. I would have watched that.
Well, it's pretty messed up that they that those guys at the beginning, after they assassinated that, or incorrectly assassinated that one woman, that they shoot Rocky on the way out. Can't have that firecrotch leave the movie so early.
I am happy that is your prime concern with that. Not that she was getting married in a few days, but that the eye candy is now gone.
One less to look at, yes. Yeah, so guns. Look, like I said, it's pretty much like all the other ones. It's not really getting any too highs or lows. It's just consistently the same thing, pretty much from start to finish. You get guns in many different ways. I enjoy it enough, but I certainly don't. I mean, if they didn't have the women in it, would I watch these? No, I wouldn't. But because they're in there, it's enough to at least keep my attention, shall we say. 6 out of 10 is my score, because that's pretty much what I've given all the other ones, except Hard Ticket to Hawaii, which I think we gave a 7. Or at least I gave a 7.
Yeah, so much like you, this is pretty much the same as everything we've seen recently. I do think it's maybe a little better than Savage Beach, and maybe on par with Picasso Trigger. I do think the plot itself isn't complicated, but just all these characters who, were quote unquote supposed to know. I mean, maybe, I don't know how the average individual watches this. Maybe they recognize, oh, hey, that guy was in Picasso Triggerfish, and hey, that guy was definitely in Hard Ticket to Hawaii. I mean, they're all the same to me. All these women have been the same since the first movie. But it's totally enjoyable, so I'm also going to give this one a 6 out of 10. And, I could see myself watching this again, if only because there are some beautiful individuals within.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it just hit me. The one actress who I mentioned I enjoyed in this movie also played Pantera in, I think it was, Picasso Trigger. And I think I mentioned in that review that she was also my favorite actress there, so I have some consistency at least, so that's nice.
Yeah, no, I definitely enjoyed her in Picasso Trigger as well, so just not my favorite.
Speaking of your favorite, we have upcoming a pretty interesting movie, A Stranger is Watching from 1982, directed by Sharon S. Cunningham, who probably most famously did Friday the 13th.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably most known for that.
And I suspect a lot of people who watch it just to see how he would do compared to Friday the 13th, even though this is apparently based off a book by Mary Higgins Clark, which I did not know. But there's a lot of things I didn't know about this movie, which primarily follows a kid, an 11-year-old girl, and some reporter woman being kidnapped by this guy who may not be the most mentally stable individual out there, and they're sort of locked down beneath a train area, and they have to deal with being kidnapped and locked beneath a train area. So this movie, I think, to me, is interesting for a few different reasons. Among them, it has a very urban, gritty crime feel to it, which I don't think takes away from the horror. But it's certainly, if you're coming in expecting a slash or anything like a Friday the 13th, you're going to be definitely disappointed. So I have a few things to say about this, but what was your take on this one?
Yeah, I'd never seen this one before, so first time watch for me. First things first, the title of the movie is kind of boring. It's just like, what are we gonna call this movie? It's got a stranger in it, and he's like watching someone.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I think it was a movie in the late 70s that was just called He Knows You, or it's actually 1980, He Knows You're Alone, which is another, just a sort of generic, it doesn't do much.
Is that the Tom Hanks movie? Or...
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I can't recall. But, yeah, and well, look, title doesn't really matter, but just an observation. And just like Blood Harvest, I'm really struggling on what to give this movie. Because, look, I had an okay time watching it, but it just felt like the movie was like failed escape after failed escape. And like it's just constantly the same thing for a big portion of the movie. Now, the beginning of the movie has its own separate scenes, and the end has its own separate scenes, but for the big middle chunk of the movie, it's just, she's acting nice to the guy that's kidnapped them until he goes away, then they're trying to escape, and then, it's the same thing, rinse and repeat. Yeah, like I said, look, I didn't have a bad time with it. I just felt like it was just too much of the same stuff going on for a big chunk of the movie, which I don't know if I would ever want to sit through again. There's just not enough going on in the actual movie for me to really say, ooh, I need to see that again.
But it does bring to the forefront the interesting question of capital punishment. So, hey, if you want to think about that, this is a perfect movie for you.
Yeah. Well, that makes me think of the ending, because it's got like this freeze frame ending. To be honest, I actually usually don't mind freeze frame endings, but I just like how at the end it's like, oh, and by the way, that guy getting the electric chair, he was given a pardon. Credits.
Yeah. Yeah, how that's like the only thing it mentions.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of silly, but at least, we got to see one nice knife throwing scene and
yeah,
bit of
actually, I think that knife throwing scene might have been one of the worst scenes, but just because it was so goofy.
Yeah. I wonder if he still made a sandwich.
I did enjoy the setting for the movie, though, like the grimy underground train station area. I thought it was like appropriately gritty, and I guess I would say somewhat more authentic feel to it, because it really feels at times like almost like what's the movie called, The House at the Edge of the Park? It's somewhat just gritty crime movie. Obviously, this is a bit more polished, but at least it feels a little more real.
For reals. The speaking of real, the kill at the end, I struggled to believe that she was able to get that all the way through.
Hey, at times of extreme panic, a woman's hands can have strength that men cannot know.
Yeah, well, didn't seem to happen in Blood Harvest. God, give me the strength to kill him.
Hey, she tried.
Yeah. I don't necessarily mind these types of movies. It's just the got COVID. Sorry, COVID attack right there. I've lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'll just say that having not known anything about this movie before watching it, I was expecting a more more traditional slasher type thing, mainly because I never actually read these movie descriptions before watching it. So, I wouldn't say happy, but I was so surprised by what the movie turned out being, and I do appreciate how it was trying to bring like a political message into things, and I don't know, I feel like it was trying to be a little more ambitious than maybe it should have been, and I can see why a lot of people may not be mentioning this movie nowadays. I thought it was pretty interesting to watch though, and it might be worth watching if you're into some early 80s movies such as these. I'm going to give this movie probably like a 7 out of 10 for now, and I might change it later. But it just seems around average. There's some things I liked, things I didn't like, and like I said, it might be worth watching.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a 6 for now. I didn't have a bad time watching it, but like I said, there's a lot of scenes that just rinse and repeat scenes of them trying to escape and then resetting and then trying again, and I get it, but at the same time it's just, of course that's what you're gonna do in that situation, but still, I just felt like the movie could have had a little more meat in there somewhere, or at least show some meat, not necessarily the killer's meat.
I am happy you made a distinction. Well, speaking of Child's Play clones, what is our last movie tonight, Chalky?
Yeah, so last up we've got Dolly Dearest from 1991. In this movie, we've got a toy manufacturer who buys the Dolly Dearest factory in Mexico, one of the shittiest factories I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And so right next to this Mayan, what do you call it, like burial ground type thing?
The excavation.
Yeah. Essentially, this malevolent spirit of Sanzia, which is like this devil child thing, has taken refuge in one of the dolls and eventually takes control of the toy manufacturer's daughter in the movie. So Yeah, I think I saw this once on VHS back in the old days, but I don't even know if I ever finished watching it. It was just one of those movies that's, I guess at the time I found it quite dull. I mean, especially in comparison to something like Child's Play, which is a movie that did kill a doll much better than this one. But I didn't have a bad time with this one. I think just more or less in an inconsistent time with it, because I think later on in the movie you see a lot more doll action. You know, you see a lot more close-ups and dolls moving around and all that type of stuff, and that's where things, I guess, get a little more entertaining than earlier in the movie, where it's just, you know, the usual, well, you might see the doll just slightly move a little bit here and there, but, I mean, we learned pretty early on that the doll is moving on its own. I mean, it's pretty much in the first scene when she takes the doll back, you see the doll move, so I don't really see the point in building up to that. It's not like Child's Play, where for at least a portion of the movie, you know that maybe, just maybe, there's a chance that the kid is just mental. But in this case, you see the doll move early on, so what's the point in not showing the doll much compared to later scenes?
Although I will say, I think that once we get toward the ending, I sort of lose some of my interest. Like, as soon as there's like, 5 or 6 of these dolls running around, and it's not just one, it feels a bit more silly to me.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem that I always had with Cult of Chucky. Like, I don't really enjoy having multiple Chuckies, and the same thing here. I mean, I'd rather just one crazy doll running around. And speaking of the ending, I mean, there's a bit of a stupid ending. Just like the ending kind of sucks. It's like, let's just throw a bunch of dynamite around, explosion, credits. Though I will say, probably the highlight in this movie is the kid shooting that one doll. Play with this, bitch.
I mean, yeah, that kid was the best in this movie anyway. He's such an entertaining guy.
Yeah. I guess another thing is that the voice for the doll, or dolls, is, I mean, it doesn't feel like they got any particular voice actor to do that. It's just like just some random person trying to sound sinister. It's just, yeah, it just does nothing for me, the actual doll voice in this movie. It's not like, you get a Brad Dourif who is a really good voice actor, so yeah, that didn't help.
Yeah, I want to mention, you saw this once before, like on an old VHS copy. So I found a copy of this movie on YouTube. And the version I watched had like maybe 240 pixels. It was I mean, it was, especially on my 55-inch TV, it just looks so horrible. I mean,
Yeah.
that didn't take away from the movie. I feel like I can look past a lot of those technical aspects. And I actually enjoyed this movie a bit more than I thought I would. But it just sort of amazed me about how old this copy looked like that I was watching. Which, you could argue maybe gave the movie a little more charm than it otherwise might have had.
Yeah, well, I watched it on Blu-ray, so I had a pretty good, clear picture quality for this one. So.
Now, do you happen to own this movie on Blu-ray for some reason?
Yes, I do. Look, I just buy a whole bunch of movies. Like, I blind buy a lot as well, so it's not like I bought it because I love it. But like I said, I always try and watch the better quality versions of movies. Yeah.
Like, this is one of those movies that I just remember seeing the title to a lot when I was a kid. Like, it might randomly be on either Sci-Fi or AMC or something. And I just skipped over this movie so many times when I was younger just because it sounded so shitty. That, finally actually taking the time to watch it, it's, not as bad as I expected. I expected it to be, it's still not a great movie, but, it's probably okay for one watch if you're into, like, late 80s, early 90s horror.
And doll movies.
Yes, which is a sort of a niche that pretty much only Child's Play does correctly.
Ventriloquist.
Well, I was going to say and Dolls. Dolls was a pretty good movie. Maybe not Ventriloquist.
I was just bringing up Triloquist to ruffle some feathers, rattle some cages.
I am indeed one to have his cages rattled quite often at the mention of really shitty movies.
Well, going back to Dolly Dearest, I guess one thing that I did enjoy, at least with the doll, is that I did find the actual doll, at least when it was moving, like when you see the closer up scenes of the face moving and things like that, I found those somewhat creepy, but yeah, that's really the only thing I really liked about that.
Well, I sort of like the idea of a family uprooting from, I think it was California, just moving the whole family down to a foreign country where they don't speak the language. So, I mean, talk about a way to really screw your children up. Like, and especially once the guy saw the condition of the factory. Like, I just felt so bad for the guy.
Yeah. And the kids didn't seem to make too much of a deal of it.
They should just be happy they have like a housemaid. Who actually, the housemaid reminded me a bit of the one housemaid from Paranormal Activity 2. The Spanish one who's doing those chant thingies. So, that's fun.
I wonder if she makes a mean burrito or a nice plate of nachos.
Well, I suspect her family's been doing that for like thousands of years, so she probably has you on that.
Here comes the guacamole.
Yes. Speaking of guacamole, what would you rate this movie?
I would give this a spicy rating of 6 out of 10.
Which has been, if I recall, a pretty consistent rating for you tonight.
Yeah, every single movie's been given a 6, and that sums up how much I enjoyed watching these movies. It was, it was a trying effort to get all these done.
But you feel like a bad person now that you have?
Not really.
Okay. Well, for me, I'm also going to give Dolly Dearest a 6. I like some things about it, but other things seemed incredibly cheap, such as like the evil spirit escaping at the beginning. It just looked sort of horrible to me. And the ending seemed somewhat rushed. I mean, I'm happy that they, ended it, but it just still seems somewhat rushed and not necessarily as suspenseful as it probably could have been. I like Chucky said, these people just running around in the dark placing dynamite down, and it's just sort of silly. But I don't think it's a terrible movie. I'm happy to have seen it, and it came out pretty much as expected. So 6 out of 10 seems like a pretty fair rating.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. I'll leave that in.
Yes. I have long said one of the actresses I found most attractive was Ellen Page, and I'm sure you saw the news there.
Yeah, I heard about that yesterday. Something about her claiming to be transgender or some shit.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, that always makes me feel good, questioning my sexuality.
Yeah. So, does that change anything for you?
Not right now.
Well,
I guess I just have to come up with a different answer if anybody ever asks me, hey, who's the most attractive actress out there?
I really like Ellen Page, and they're like, that dude. Just imagine, we're watching these other Andy Sedaris movies, and at some point, Cynthia Brimhall reveals she has a dick or something. I'm gonna be like, no.
Yeah, that'll just destroy your life. I can imagine. I could get PTSD.
Yeah.